So gentlemen, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And the topic of interest today is the holiday season and dealing with stresses that come with it. So gentlemen, if you could, introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of your career background.
Sure. So Major Aaron Esche, I'm a clinical psychologist here in the Air Force. Wearing the uniform, I'm in the Air Force. But so right now my title, I have two hats that I'm wearing: the Director of Psychological Health for the installation, also the Director of Training for the psychology residency that we have here, a training pipeline here in our clinic in the MTF here at Wright-Patterson. So Major Salazar and I did residency here together, actually, several years ago. Did some time up in Minot, North Dakota, and came back a few years ago to be on faculty here in the pipeline. So do a little bit of patient care, a little bit of teaching, a little bit of consulting around base. In my Director of Psychological Health job, I just answer a lot of questions and interface with a lot of people. Get a pulse for what's going around town and what we need to do to change operations, or what we need to do to think about prevention efforts because maybe the same issue is coming up. Getting the word out on things, serving on some committees, and serving on a team of community partners that are also involved as helping agencies also. But I'm sure we'll get into that with some of the questions today.
Okay. Good. Thank you. I'm Major Salazar. I'm coming over just recently from BAMC. So I got to Wright-Patterson about 3 months ago, back in late August, early September. I'm the neuropsychologist for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm also the mental health OIC for our clinic. So my job mostly consists of seeing patients who have concerns for the neurocognitive performance. So maybe potential strokes, brain injuries, or concern for dementia in our older population, so family members and retirees. And then as OIC, I'm really just making sure the ship is running, making sure that processes stay intact, that they are working, and if they're not working, how do we fix them? Do we need to overhaul them? And in between, just kind of helping out where I can.
Yeah. So we're actually recording this on December 2nd, and just yesterday, the Chief of Staff, General Brown, sent out a letter to airmen, and it was all about suicide. And I thought it was interesting that he talked about how he's heartbroken by all the reports that he sees come across his desk, and I imagine he sees them all. And reflecting about, not just the death of the airman, but also the impact on his family and his friends and the teammates, and always asking that one question, could we have done something to prevent this? Is there some action that I could have done? And so I just wanted to start off the whole conversation with that. What can be done? I know that you've always heard the thought that you don't want to ask somebody directly if they're thinking about killing themselves because you're afraid you might plant the seed in their brain. But tell us, what should we actually do?
Sure. So the research actually doesn't support the kind of like planting the seed hypothesis. Just asking the question is generally the best thing. I'm maybe a little bit old school. There's that idea of ACE, that ask, care, escort. If you're talking to someone, and this is kind of where building up a relationship prior really helps, right? So I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but having a sense of community, having a sense of connection within your unit, so that you can go up to your fellow airman, go up to your work partner or whomever, and say, hey man, you haven't seen this, you haven't been as open before as you normally are, you're not as bubbly as you normally are, what's going on? You can kind of open up with that question, and then at some point in the conversation, ask the question directly. Have you been thinking about hurting yourself, or have you been having thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore? If they answer affirmatively, right, then at that point, don't let them go, right? Stay by their side, go to your first sergeant, go to your commander, go to mental health. If it's off-base duty hours, contact your shirt, utilize tools like 988. or your local ER, local mental health hospital. I think that's kind of a direct answer to that question. I don't know if Esche has any other insights.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really glad that you brought up that, like, it's just kind of a meme. I think I don't know how that crept into general understanding. And I guess in some sense, I can see how that's a rational thought, that somehow me suggesting this idea is going to cause harm to somebody, and I really don't want to cause harm. But I think that's more of a symptom of I'm just so nervous I don't know what to do.
Yep.
So maybe in a way that it's good that people are caring and realizing that this is a sensitive issue. But it's just certainly not true. And so that's what the A is in the ACE model, is just ask. And it's not an easy question to ask. But it's an important one to ask, because honestly, it describes a level of severity of how bad a situation might be. And just assuming it's not there or not having that information, your calculus doesn't have all the data you might need to really intervene to make it happen. And I would say it's probably worth having an awkward question asked than to regret something later. But going into it empowered, knowing that no, that's actually not the case. It's not going to some like Inception, like this idea is going to grow and it's going to be my fault if this happens. And I think it's the exact opposite, actually.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to err on the side of caution, because at the end of the day, you don't know what people are dealing with. I mean, everybody's dealing with a lot of stuff, and you just don't know how they're reacting to that. And so any little changes in behavior, can be indications that there's a bigger problem underneath.
Yeah, but I think the care part, like Major Salazar was saying, is absolutely important. And I realize how hard that can be to come by sometimes, because I don't know how everybody's ops are in life cycle management. I'm sure it's quite busy, just like it is in the MTF. And so sometimes caring is an afterthought, or thinking big picture and offering more is hard when your primary duties are, taking 10, 12 hours a day to complete. But honestly, that buffer is just so vitally important. It's so foundational to not even just thriving, but surviving.
Mm-hmm.
In our environment, sometimes when ops are really high, just really caring and really being there. Because first of all, like, you receive something yourself, being part of something that you're in a community where you're giving and receiving, nurturing and belonging, and like that stuff's not nothing. Like that really matters. It's not just some cute thing that these shrinks say from their psychobabble Bible, but it also will allow you to notice when those differences do occur, when something's not quite right. Because I think the risk is, if we just have tunnel vision and are going about our primary duties, and the real risk is that we could miss changes in somebody's behavior. And honestly, even if it's not like a suicide situation, just asking, hey, how you're doing? Good Lord, that really could just turn the ship around. Maybe that's something, the thing that somebody needed that day just to get through that moment, So.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of the purpose, we wanted to talk about the holidays. So we're coming into the holiday season. It's the most joyous time of the year. Everybody always talks about how happy they are, how excited they are during the holidays. But it creates a lot of unique situations that can cause stress, and it could be everything from, how am I going to afford these Christmas presents that I'm buying for my kids? Or, are we going to have dinner at my wife's house this year? Or are we going to go to my father-in-law's house? Or, all of those kinds of things can create all kinds of unique stressors that we don't deal with most of the time. And like you said, it's still a high ops tempo kind of time with your job. So let's talk about some of those situations and ways that you can deal with the stresses that come up this time of the year.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you kind of hit that on the head. There are some stressors that may just feel a little bit unavoidable. I think maybe instead of focusing on what we call that primary stressor, right? So the primary stressor may be knowing that you have to go to your in-laws for the holidays. we can talk about the secondary and tertiary stressors, right? So there's oftentimes the primary source of distress is not what's impacting us the most. It's often our reaction to it. So I'm stressed out about having to go to see my in-laws, for example. But then that stress generates maybe a little bit of lack of sleep, or it generates some annoyance at myself for being stressed out about it, right? And then it's this, now maybe I feel guilty that I am stressed out and that I'm annoyed because it's Christmas and some people don't even have a family to celebrate with. And here I am complaining about having to choose between two families. What kind of person am I, right? So you get these sort of like second, third order, fourth effects of levels of stress. And to that, I can say, just kind of starting at the beginning of, yeah, these times are stressful. It's okay, right? That kind of understanding that going into the holiday season is going to be stressful, and there's not always a lot that can be done about that, can take so much off of your plate, because you're going to be able to relieve maybe a sense of that guilt. You're going to be able to relieve a sense of that maybe displaced sadness, right? And just understand that, hey, I'm going to see family, I'm going to have a good time, I'm going to enjoy company, and I'm going to be stressed about it at the same time, right? There's room for both things. I think can just take a lot off someone's shoulders. Also recognizing that there's often distress and eustress, right? So distress being stress about negative things, and eustress being kind of excitement. You can think about it as excitement or just general stress about positive things. Our body doesn't do a good job at distinguishing the two. You're still going to have increased heart rate, maybe poor sleep, restricted or overactive diet, any of whatever your generalized anxiety responses are. Your body doesn't make a good distinction between the two, and it can lead us into, well, I'm not sleeping the way I normally am. I'm not eating the way I normally do. Maybe I'm stressed out, right? And now we've put this sort of label on it and come to the conclusion that something's wrong. When no, it's a change in our system. It's a change in our rhythm, change in what's going on. And that almost always brings about some kind of response from our body.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the thing I'd kind of add to with what you just said, well, first I'll back up and say, yeah, I don't necessarily think that holiday stress is all that different from stress. I guess that's something you were touching on there too. I think the unique things about it is it could be anniversaries for griefs that folks may have gone through, just a reminder of a loss, or just noticing that contrast when somebody's not there, when everybody's having the most wonderful time of the year. There's a lot of messaging that you should be feeling a certain way, but I think honestly, like, we get that messaging all day long. Like, I'm a man, I shouldn't feel XYZ. I've got everything in this life, I shouldn't feel blah, blah, blah. I'm anxious, or I'm feeling depressed, and I shouldn't feel that way. I get all this messaging that these aren't like normal feelings, even though that's absolutely part of the human condition, is to worry or to feel sad. And it's honestly like an important component of navigating your world, because it's data. It's a signal that something's not quite right, and essentially can serve as like a motivation tool to try and change some things. So I guess all that to say, if the holiday season is maybe just a microcosm of how we experience life the rest of the year also, I think to me, it just really boils down to how you're relating to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if you buy into this idea, or maybe you're telling yourself without any other outside input that I shouldn't be feeling this way, like, that's at loggerheads with what's really going on. And the way we can change our relationship with that is just like, give yourself permission to feel whatever it is you're feeling, because it's a fact that no feeling or thought that anyone has ever had has lasted for forever, and it will go away. And if we're spending so much energy to just try and escape that experience or grasp towards something more positive, you're really missing the richness of what it means to be in that particular moment, to grow through that, or to just get past it. Because, I don't know how many people who are going to end up watching this would raise their hand to me saying, like, ever felt stressed out on the way to work, and then by the time lunch rolled around, it kind of went away. I mean, it's most of the time that's what our experiences are like. And so if we could just give ourselves permission to feel stressed, let it come and let it go, so that we can just act as a person we'd rather be, instead of just have that be dictated by whatever feeling we're having. Like,
Yeah.
and we can be who we'd rather be with our actions. And I don't think that has anything, like the holiday season, that's really no different than how it would be in March, you know?
So if you're at work and if you're feeling that way, or if you have a coworker that, you know, it feels like they're being stressed, I mean, should you engage more? I mean, is there value in the process of like venting out kind of your frustrations or that kind of thing?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So acting like as a sounding board. So, you know, just trying to ask the person, you know, hey, what's going on, and you know, and then just letting them vent on you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's real utility in, because I mean, I think, just back to the point I was making, that's an acknowledgement that I'm actually feeling this way, and saying it out loud. Like, I mean, it doesn't even take the research that shows this for somebody to know this in the common sense kind of way. Like, you kind of feel better when you vent, you know? I mean, I think that there is the possibility to overdo it, and then people get tired of hearing you vent all the time. But I mean, there's real utility in doing that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say on the other side of that is it feels even, I'm sure, hopefully people can relate to this. You know, you vent, you go to a coworker or a friend, you vent, and they validate you, right? Yeah, man, that is stressful. Like, oh, I know, last year I had to spend time with my in-laws, and it really just was not a good time. I know how you're feeling. That's gonna suck. You know, text me about what's going on, or it's this sense of like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that's having this sense of stress. I'm not the only one that's having this thought. Good to know. It normalizes and validates the way we feel, and it makes the problem seem a little bit smaller, a little bit more doable, a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, I mean, when you feel like you're not unique, you're not weird, you're not abnormal, you know, that you realize that, hey, I'm just going through normal human emotions that people go through every day. I mean, there is some value in just kind of understanding that.
Yeah, just realizing, yeah, you're not alone. Because I think just there's a through line with just about anything we'd see on the clinical side, that like like a fever might emerge for lots of different things for a medical condition. That feeling of alienation, that I'm the only person going through this thing, emerges for an awful lot of what we see back here. And that's a symptom, not a truth, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So just saying it out loud just fosters the fabric needed to have the community we're talking about, you know, so that it's not just this idea in the abstract, it's like really a thing that's happening. Part of that is just everybody putting energy into that, and fostering a community where being able to vent is an appropriate thing to do, you know, an acknowledged and maybe even a rewarded thing to do.
Yeah. So if people need more professional help, I mean, if you feel like you've talked to somebody and they vented, but you're a little more concerned, how can they go about finding that help? Or what are some resources that they can reach out to?
That's a great question, and I want to make that distinction a little bit more clear about that. You know, that's kind of severe side, right? So kind of what Major Esche was alluding to already, the richness of life, right? Things like sadness, grief, anxiety, fear, nervousness, right? Those are, to use kind of a software joke, like it's a feature, not a bug, right? Like it's embedded into the human experience. And it's something that should be embraced, not discarded or try to run away from. But we have these sort of severe symptoms. Sometimes we have these severe experiences where we want or we need more help. It's outside of the normal human experience. And by normal, I mean, you take the general population and it's this, most people are not going to experience this, right? So not normal as in what is normal, because no one's normal at the end of the day. But you have this sort of like out of the norm rather than not normal, right? Out of the norm human experience that results in a sense of profound anxiety, right? Profound grief, profound impairment of functioning really is kind of what we're looking at. It's getting in the way of that person being themselves on a day-to-day basis. They're not working out the way they used to. They're not social the way they used to. They're not, they're not present at work the way they're used to being. And so now we look at, let's get you some help, right? This is something more than a friend is going to be capable of working with, something more than family is going to be capable of kind of correcting. And so thankfully the Air Force is, and I think the DoD in general, is moving towards making this process easier, because more often than we like to hear, there are people who say, well, I went to such and such helping agency and they just turned me away. Right, I went to MFLAC and they said, well, that's a little bit too severe for our liking. Best of luck. Moving forward, the DoD is kind of going with something called no wrong door policy. How that's going to look like at every base is going to be a little bit different. Here at Wright-Pat, it's going to involve having all of the non-specialty helping services in one building. So that if somebody comes in and has a spiritual crisis, hey, great, our chaplain's just down this hall. If someone has a financial crisis, great, AFRC is right here. Let's go talk to a budget specialist. If they're having a life difficulty, they can see MFLAG, military one source representative right then and there. Ideally, maybe we'll be able to get someone who can liaise with mental health. And if that problem is severe enough to require that mental health response, they'll get kind of a hot transfer, a warm handoff. Thank you. A warm handoff to the MTF to come speak with us. So for the future, it ideally will be a little bit easier. But let's talk about the now. It's a matter of, you have different ways of doing this. You can go up the chain if you trust the person above you, right? You can speak to a supervisor, you can speak to your shirt, you can come directly to the MTF. Again, this is true for Wright-Pat, come directly to the MTF. We have a vectoring process that I'll let Esche kind of speak more to, where we can kind of say, hey, this is suitable, what you're experiencing is suitable for this level of care, right? Kind of like your PCM, you tell your PCM some problems, and they'll say, all right, this is a PCM level problem, or this is an oncology problem. But I just want to emphasize that there is no wrong way of seeking help, right? Someone in your life that you have, you can go to them, say you need help, and that person can ideally help you get the help that you need. But direct paths, MTF, and chain of command.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, so with this whole thing with no wrong door, a big part of making this whole thing successful is getting the info out there about where all the venues for help are, because we as the mental health clinic don't have a monopoly on being able to help people. And in fact, this is sort of like a rebranding of how we've normally advertised, what we offer. We've got very specialized training, and like Major Salazar was kind of alluding to, we're really having to be more like a specialty care clinic where we use our specialized training. It's not always the most efficient or quick process, because the real screwdriver work of working with a major depressive disorder or a post-traumatic stress disorder or somebody in crisis, it's like our tools aren't super quick, but we are specialized to deliver those. And we can't answer every call. Just our capabilities started to become overwhelmed, I'd say 5-6 years ago. And so we've really been forced to make this change where, and honestly, I like the way that we're seeing this. So we're kind of situated, I guess this is your right. We're situated kind of back here, but the front line down here might be, having that community in the unit. And when that doesn't quite work, we're thinking about talking to the chaplain or the military family life counselors that are around base, or military one source, which is a service that's available for all DoD folks. These are brief interventions that are really efficient and answer a specific problem and working toward a solution to get through that, like, a loss of a relationship or having trouble adjusting to a new place, or just having a disagreement with a coworker. Just everyday normal stuff that every human being will probably go through at some point in their life. All of that is available, and these folks are trained professionals that have some of the credentials that we have up here. when those don't quite answer the mail, if there's an acute safety concern, or if, like Major Salazar was saying, maybe this issue is just not going away and it's lasted, a couple weeks, maybe a month, or even longer than that. And it's starting to impair my ability to live the life I'd rather live. And I don't know how to get out of it. Like, that's when maybe the more specialized care comes in, and we can offer that kind of service. But what I like about this no wrong door idea is that we're all working together. And so that team of providers that I talked about at the very beginning that I've been working with are the MFLACs, are the chaplains, and we have folks that liaise with Military One Source. And even for our civilians, we work with the folks that run the Employee Assistance Program that can vector folks to care if you're not a TRICARE beneficiary here.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can help get folks routed to the appropriate level. But that may be that, hey, you came to us, but we're saying we actually don't think you necessarily need our services, but we have these other folks here that probably be able to get you seen sooner, and we're going to send you that way. So it's actually a good thing if we vector you somewhere else that's maybe an appropriate care. So anyway, last thought on this is just the thing that's going to make this work is everybody kind of learns that, hey, mental health's not quite just a monopoly on all of this. And maybe there's more appropriate, briefer intervention I can do. And there's nothing even in my medical record when I have to go and talk to these kinds of people that answers the mail, all patched up and back in the fight, no big deal, And then that saves our bandwidth to be able to help the cases that might need specialty care or the crises that need managed to keep people alive.
And I think it's always good to talk about, there's always been this stigma about reaching out for help, going to mental health or something like that. And in recent years, we've seen some senior leaders that have openly talked about the fact, I think General Brown mentioned that he goes in for checkups, do you see that as useful? Has that helped kind of maybe turn the tide a little bit on some of the stigma of reaching out?
Absolutely. I think it's generational, right? I think the younger generation is more open to seeking out mental health. I can't tell you, if you open up social media, how many different celebrities or people of kind of like public renown will share the message of it's okay not to be okay, right? And that trickles down and gets passed down. So that really is kind of I think the overriding mindset in our younger airmen is that it's okay not to be okay. Therapy is useful for everybody. So yeah, I think on the younger side, people aren't afraid to come and seek out mental health care. I don't want to speak for, I don't want to make it as black and white as generational. There are certainly older individuals who feel the same way. But if I had to kind of flip a coin, or if I had to take a bet, really, the ones more likely to be hesitant to come out and seek mental health are going to be maybe some of that old guard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the stigma is probably still alive and well, and I don't want to sugarcoat that at all. I do think that it's improved, and I think it's just because information's out there, and I really think the quality of the information that's out there will be the only thing that that settles this kind of issue. I think it's hard not to say that sometimes going to see anybody in the MTF could affect your career. And I'm sure lots of people might not go see their PCM because even if their legs hurt for a long time, it's just like, I just don't want the trouble. I want to be able to deploy. So I don't know that we'll ever really get rid of it because, part of our job really is assessing if somebody can deploy. And if they can't, we really need to be able to serve the Air Force and the people who are working downrange by saying, this person is good to go, and they need to be able to trust that we can say that they're good to go. And part of our job really is to help to get folks transition to care if it's not appropriate to be in the military anymore, to the VA system or some other venue. Thankfully, that's not anywhere near a huge percentage of what we see. I do think that that's probably the big question mark people might have is just sort of like, well, what is this going to do to my career?
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, we may not know that until we can talk a little bit longer, but maybe the threat of that conversation, it's like the risk of this going away that I don't like, I'd rather just not be able to talk about it. You know, and so I don't know that we can solve that that kind of conflict right now. So this is another thing that I really like about having this community of helping agencies is that, you know, maybe if you're reserving us as a specialty care clinic, you're really not needing to talk to us until you really need to talk to us. And there's all these other helping agencies that don't even really need to get in your business about military readiness and things like that. And so we really do want to encourage folks to seek help early, you know, and to get help in those particular venues and back in fight and shape. And there's no real need to worry about stigma with that. I mean, honestly, our job here is to get people in remission and back in the fight. We're not looking to screw people over. Like, I went to school for a long time, and it wasn't to learn how to screw people over, you know, but I can't help that somebody might worry about what it would be like, you know, what's going to happen after you talk to me here, even though probably 97% of the time, nothing happens. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've always heard that is the vast majority of time, it's not anything to really be concerned about. But you would say that if someone is overwhelmingly concerned about that kind of issue, to go to one of the other agencies to start with, and see, you know, you can go to a chaplain. The chaplains have confidentiality. You know, go to the MPLAC or something like that, and get some help, especially early on. I mean, that's really what you need to do.
Right. Yeah, and honestly, there's mechanisms in place for them to refer to us if they feel like that's beyond the scope of what they've been charged to take care of. And so there's no harm in going to somebody like that first.
Yep.
Right. I would also throw in, you know, get help early, get help on the early side. Something a few bases back, I was at an ACC base, and the term that we kind of coined, or that had been coined, was human weapons platform, right? Because we started comparing, maybe for better or for worse, we started comparing our people to our aircraft. You know, you look at these aircraft, so let's take the C-130. It has scheduled maintenance built into its life cycle. Before anything ever goes wrong with it, right? It has to get every part of it inspected. Every few years, it has a total maintenance teardown where all the way to the wheels, you're basically stripping it back to check every last wire, every last panel, to make sure it still flies well. Right? No one in their right mind would fly an airplane until it's broken and then repair, right? Maintenance is far better than repair. But we don't do that with our people, right? We don't do that. We wait for our people to break, or people wait for themselves to break, right? Oh, I can put it off. Oh, I can put it off. Oh, I can put it off. And now they have a crisis, and now the only outlet is mental health. So get care early, get care often, and especially utilizing those other resources, right? MFLAC's not gonna take notes and put it into your medical record. Military One Source isn't gonna take notes and put it into your medical records. Chaplain's 100% confidential. Getting care when it's still just, I'm arguing with my wife back and forth, is much better than getting care after a divorce or domestic violence incident. Right now, there's a lot more to take care of.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We all need to get our software updated from time to time, right?
Right.
So gentlemen, that pretty much brings us to the end of our time. But before we close, I wanted to see, is there anything that you'd like to reiterate or anything that I forgot to ask you about?
No, do you have anything else you want to talk about targeted care, or?
No, I mean, I think the No Wrong Door and our targeted care initiatives are all getting at getting folks the right venue for care. So yeah, best we can. We just really want to emphasize, hey, we don't have a monopoly on getting better. And so please don't think of it as either I go to the mental health clinic or I get nothing. There's lots of options on the menu, and we're really trying to socialize everybody here at Wright-Patterson, whichever unit you belong to. There's venues available and lots of folks that are trained to do this, not just us. And we're happy to help, and we're good at what we do, but happy to share the load with everybody else that's here doing good work too.
Yep. And other than that, I mean, be a good wingman. Reach out to your coworkers, to your family, your friends, and check in on people, see how they're doing.
Yeah. And I guess since, our thrust today was talking about holiday stress, just a
Mhm.
repeat of what we were saying, like just because there's a song that says it's the most wonderful time of the year, give yourself permission to have whatever it is you're experiencing, because it's going to come and it's going to go. Trying to get rid of it might keep you stuck in it. So,
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining us today, and have a great holiday season.
thanks.
Absolutely.
You
You too.
too. Thanks for
Take care.
having us.